Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, great to have you. You picked a good one to start with. And if you've been here before, you already know we don't come here to waste time. We get straight into the things that actually matter, the conversations that most people are too afraid to have, and the information that can genuinely change how you move in life and in relationships. So if that's what you're here for, you're in the right place. Now let's get into something that might sting a little. Most men are doing relationships wrong. Not because they're bad people, not because they don't care, but because nobody ever taught them what women actually respond to on a deep, genuine level. Instead, men are out here trying to impress women with the wrong things: money, looks, status, constant availability. And then wondering why the connection never goes as deep as they want it to, or why the attraction fades faster than it should. Here's the truth that most men will never hear. The things that make a woman truly deeply drawn to a man have very little to do with what he has, and almost everything to do with how he carries himself, how he makes her feel, and the specific behaviors he brings into the relationship that most other men simply don't. And that last part is key. Most other men simply don't. We're talking about the 1% of behaviors, the things that are not complicated, not expensive, not out of reach, but are so rare in men today that when a woman encounters a man who actually does them, she takes notice immediately. This is what today's video is all about. We're breaking down the specific things that 99% of men overlook, ignore, or just never learned, and that women absolutely love when they finally experience them. These are not tricks. These are not manipulation tactics. These are genuine qualities and behaviors that separate the men women casually date from the men women deeply connect with and never want to lose. So stay with me, because what we're about to get into is the kind of content that, if you actually apply it, will change the way women experience you. Completely. 1. They actually listen. Really listen. Here's something that sounds simple but is rarer than you think. Actually listening. Not just waiting for your turn to talk. Not half listening while scrolling through your phone. Not nodding along while your mind is somewhere else entirely. Real, genuine, full attention listening. The kind where the other person finishes talking and feels completely heard, completely understood, and completely valued. That kind of listening is so rare in men today that when a woman experiences it, it genuinely stands out. And not just stands out, it creates a level of emotional connection that almost nothing else can replicate as quickly or as powerfully. Most men think that attraction is built through what they say. The right words, the right jokes, the right compliments at the right time. And while those things have their place, the real magic happens in the moments of silence, in the moments of attention, in the moments where instead of talking, a man simply tunes in completely and lets the other person feel like the most important thing in the room. Women are incredibly perceptive about this. The difference between a man who is genuinely listening and a man who is just performing attention is something that gets picked up on almost immediately. And the moment that difference is felt, the entire dynamic of the interaction shifts. Think about two people on a date. One person is engaged, making eye contact, asking follow-up questions based on what was just said, remembering small details, and bringing them back up naturally in conversation. The other person is physically present but mentally elsewhere, giving generic responses, steering every topic back to personal stories, and never really digging deeper into what the other person is sharing. Now think about how each of those experiences feels from the receiving end. One feels like a genuine connection is forming. The other feels like a performance, like going through the motions. The difference between those two experiences is not talent, not looks, not money. It is simply the quality of attention being given. And that quality of attention is something 99% of men have never been taught to develop intentionally. Here is what men need to understand. Listening is not a passive activity. It is one of the most active and powerful things a man can do in any interaction. It communicates respect, it communicates genuine interest, and it creates a space where the other person feels safe enough to open up more deeply. And the deeper someone opens up, the stronger the emotional bond becomes. So if there is one thing to take from this section and apply immediately, it is this. The next time there is a real conversation happening, put the phone down, make genuine eye contact, ask questions that show real curiosity, and simply be present. That level of attention, as basic as it sounds, will set any man apart from the crowd in a way that words and gestures alone never could. 2. They lead with confidence, not arrogance. Let's talk about something that gets misunderstood constantly: confidence. Because a lot of men either have too little of it, or they confuse it with something else entirely. They either shrink back, second-guess every move, and wait for permission to take the lead, or they go too far in the other direction and come across as arrogant, loud, and self-centered. And both of those extremes miss the mark completely. What women actually respond to is the version of confidence that sits right in the middle: quiet, grounded, and completely unbothered by the need for external validation. That kind of confidence is magnetic, and it is something that the vast majority of men have never truly developed. Here is what real confidence actually looks like in practice. It looks like a man who makes decisions without constantly seeking approval. It looks like someone who has a clear sense of what he wants, what he values, and where he is going, and communicates that without apology and without arrogance. It looks like a man who can walk into a room without needing everyone in that room to immediately acknowledge him, because his sense of self does not depend on how others react to his presence. It looks like disagreeing respectfully without backing down just to avoid conflict, and it looks like being completely comfortable with silence, with uncertainty, and with not always having the right answer. That combination, decisiveness, self-assurance, and humility, is genuinely rare in men today. And when it shows up, it gets noticed. What makes arrogance so unattractive in contrast is that it is essentially confidence with no substance behind it. Arrogance is loud because it needs to be heard. It overcompensates because deep down it is trying to cover something up. A truly confident man does not need to tell anyone how great he is. His presence, his consistency, and his actions communicate that on their own. And women can feel the difference between a man who is genuinely secure in himself and a man who is putting on a show. One makes the people around feel at ease, valued, and inspired. The other makes people feel small, unheard, and like they are just part of an audience for someone else's performance. The constructive point for men here is this: confidence is not something you either have or you don't. It is something that is built, intentionally, over time. It is built through doing hard things and following through. It is built through knowing your values and refusing to compromise them. It is built through developing real skills, real discipline, and a real relationship with yourself. If confidence feels like something that is lacking right now, the answer is not to fake it louder. The answer is to start building it genuinely from the inside out. Because the kind of confidence that women are truly drawn to cannot be performed. It can only be lived. And the men who live it, who carry it naturally in everything they do, are the men who stand out without even trying. 3. They make her feel safe without being told to. This is one of those things that most men have never even thought about consciously, yet it is one of the most powerful things a man can offer in any relationship. Emotional safety. Not physical safety, although that matters too, but the kind of deep, quiet safety that comes from being around someone who is stable, consistent, and completely trustworthy with feelings and vulnerabilities. The kind of safety that makes a woman feel like she can be fully herself, without fear of judgment, without fear of ridicule, and without fear that what she shares will be used against her later. That feeling is incredibly rare. And when a woman finds it in a man, she holds onto it with everything she has. Here is the thing about emotional safety that men need to understand. It is not created through words alone. It is not created by simply saying, "You can trust me," or "I'm here for you." Those words mean very little without the consistent behavior to back them up. Emotional safety is built through patterns. It is built through being the kind of man who stays calm when conversations get difficult, who does not shut down or explode when emotions run high, who keeps private things private and never weaponizes vulnerability that was shared in a moment of openness. It is built through showing up the same way on a bad day as on a good day, through being predictable in character even when life is unpredictable. And that level of consistency, emotional, behavioral, and relational, is something that the overwhelming majority of men simply do not provide. Most men have been conditioned to disconnect from emotional conversations, to feel uncomfortable with vulnerability, and to either shut down or get defensive when things get too emotionally honest. And because of that conditioning, a lot of men unknowingly create environments where the women in their lives feel like they have to manage their emotions carefully, water things down, or avoid certain topics altogether just to keep the peace. That is the opposite of emotional safety. And in that kind of environment, real intimacy cannot grow. Because real intimacy requires both people to feel safe enough to be completely real with each other. Without that foundation, what looks like a relationship on the outside is really just two people coexisting carefully around each other. The men who get this right, the 1% who actually make women feel emotionally safe, do not do it by being perfect. They do it by being honest, by being consistent, and by responding to emotional moments with steadiness rather than panic or dismissal. When a woman brings something difficult to the table, these men do not make her feel like a burden. They lean in, they listen, they hold the space without trying to immediately fix or minimize what is being felt. And that response, calm, present, and genuine, communicates something incredibly powerful without a single word needing to be said. It communicates that she is safe here. And for a woman, there is almost nothing more attractive than that. 4. They have a life outside the relationship. This is something that most men completely get backwards, and it costs them more than they realize. A lot of men believe that the way to keep a woman interested is to give her as much of their time and attention as possible. To always be available, always responsive, always ready to drop everything the moment she calls. And while that might sound romantic on the surface, what it actually does over time is the complete opposite of what is intended. It makes a man less interesting, less attractive, and less valuable in the dynamic. Not because availability is bad, but because availability without a life behind it communicates something that quietly kills attraction. It communicates that there is nothing else going on, that she is the only thing worth showing up for. And that is far too much pressure to place on any one person or any one relationship. Here is what women are genuinely drawn to: a man who has his own world, a man who has friendships he maintains, goals he is actively working towards, passions that light him up, and a daily life that is full and purposeful with or without her in it. That kind of man brings something real to the table. Every conversation has depth because there is genuine experience behind it. Every moment spent together feels chosen rather than defaulted to. And the time and attention given feels valuable because it is clear that it is not just being handed out freely to whoever happens to be closest. When a man has a full life, his presence becomes a gift rather than a given. And women feel that difference immediately. The irony that men need to sit with is this: the more a man shrinks his world down to revolve around a woman, the less interesting he becomes to her. It is not that women want to be ignored or deprioritized. It is that women want to be chosen by a man who has options, who has direction, and who is genuinely invested in his own growth and purpose. A man who abandons his friendships, drops his hobbies, and puts his goals on hold the moment a woman enters his life is not showing love. He is showing a lack of identity. And a man without a strong sense of personal identity is a man who is difficult to deeply respect, no matter how kind or well-intentioned he might be. So here is the direct and honest message for men. Invest in your own life with the same energy that you invest in relationships. Keep the friendships that matter. Stay committed to the goals that drive you. Maintain the hobbies and interests that make you who you are. Not as a strategy to seem more attractive, but because a full and purposeful life is genuinely worth living, and the version of a man that emerges from that kind of intentional living is naturally and powerfully magnetic. A man with a real life does not need to chase. The life itself does the work, and the right woman will not only notice that, she will deeply respect and appreciate it. 5. They know how to be thoughtful without being asked. Here is something that separates the men women talk about from the men women forget: thoughtfulness. And not the grand gesture kind of thoughtfulness that shows up once in a while during birthdays or anniversaries. The quiet, consistent, everyday kind of thoughtfulness that says, I pay attention to you. I remember what matters to you, and I care enough to act on it without needing to be reminded or asked. That kind of thoughtfulness is so uncommon in men today that when a woman experiences it, it genuinely stops her in her tracks. It creates a level of emotional connection that no amount of money, looks, or charm can replicate. And yet it costs nothing except attention and intention. What this looks like in real life is simpler than most men think. It is remembering that a favorite snack was mentioned weeks ago and picking it up without any fanfare. It is noticing when things seem off and checking in with genuine care rather than waiting to be told something is wrong. It is following up on something that was shared in passing. A stressful situation at work, a difficult conversation with a family member, a goal that was mentioned once and never brought up again. When a man remembers those small details and circles back to them, it communicates something incredibly powerful. That what is said actually matters, that real attention is being paid, and that the relationship is being taken seriously enough to remember the little things. And it is almost always the little things that mean the most. Picture a man who, after a casual conversation where it was mentioned that a particular type of flower was a favorite, shows up weeks later with exactly that flower. Not a big bouquet, just a single stem, completely unprompted. No occasion, no reason, just because it was remembered. That one small gesture will stay in a woman's memory far longer than an expensive dinner ever could. Because it was not about the money or the effort in the traditional sense. It was about the fact that something small and personal was heard, held onto, and acted on. That is what thoughtfulness really is. It is proof that genuine attention was being paid when nobody was watching. And that kind of proof builds trust and attraction faster than almost anything else. Here is what men need to understand about thoughtfulness. It is not about being perfect or always knowing exactly what to do. It is about being present enough to notice, caring enough to remember, and intentional enough to act. Most men go through relationships on autopilot, responding to what is directly in front of them, and rarely thinking ahead or reflecting back. Breaking that pattern, choosing to be genuinely attentive and proactive in small ways, is the kind of shift that transforms how a woman experiences a man entirely. It moves him from someone she enjoys spending time with to someone she genuinely cannot imagine being without. And that transition happens not through grand gestures, but through the quiet, consistent accumulation of small moments that show, without any doubt, that she is truly seen. 6. They communicate honestly without drama. Let's talk about something that is genuinely rare among men: the ability to communicate clearly, honestly, and directly without turning every difficult conversation into a dramatic event. Most men fall into one of two patterns when it comes to communication in relationships. Either they go completely silent, bottle everything up, and avoid difficult conversations altogether until things eventually explode. Or they bring things up in such a reactive, emotionally charged way that the conversation derails before it even properly begins. Both patterns create the same result: unresolved tension, emotional distance, and a woman who slowly starts to feel like real, honest communication is simply not possible with this man. And that feeling, once it settles in, is incredibly hard to reverse. What women genuinely love, and rarely get, is a man who can bring something difficult to the table calmly and clearly. A man who can say, "I didn't like how that situation was handled and here is why," without raising his voice, without shutting down, and without making the other person feel attacked. A man who can express a need, set a boundary, or address a concern in a way that is direct but not aggressive, honest but not cruel, and firm but still open to conversation. That combination is incredibly attractive because it communicates emotional maturity. It communicates that this is a man who is in control of himself, who takes the relationship seriously enough to address things rather than ignore them, and who respects both himself and the other person enough to have real conversations like an adult. The reason this is so rare is that most men were never taught how to communicate emotionally. Growing up, the message that was absorbed, whether spoken or unspoken, was that expressing feelings is weakness, that conflict should be avoided, and that the best thing to do when something is wrong is to push through it quietly and move on. And so men enter relationships with almost no toolkit for honest emotional communication. They default to silence or explosion, neither of which builds anything. And the women in their lives end up feeling either like they are walking on eggshells or like they are living with someone who is emotionally completely closed off. Neither of those experiences is what creates a deep, lasting, genuinely fulfilling relationship. Here is the shift that men need to make. Start treating honest communication as a strength rather than a vulnerability. The ability to express clearly what is felt, what is needed, and what is not acceptable is not a sign of weakness. It is one of the most powerful things a man can bring to a relationship. It creates clarity, it builds trust, and it removes the kind of festering resentment that silently destroys connections over time. Start small if needed. Practice saying how things land without blame, without drama, and without needing the other person to immediately agree. Just say the truth, calmly and directly. That level of honest, drama-free communication is so rare and so valued that it will immediately set any man apart from almost everyone else she has ever been with. 7. They never stop working on themselves. Let's finish with this one because it ties everything together, and it is probably the most important point in the entire video. The men who women are genuinely drawn to, the men who create lasting attraction and deep connection, are not men who arrived at some finished, perfected version of themselves. They are men who are constantly in the process of becoming. Men who take their personal growth seriously, who hold themselves to a standard, and who never get so comfortable that they stop pushing to be better. That commitment to self-improvement is not just attractive, it is foundational. Because everything else we have talked about in this video, the listening, the confidence, the emotional safety, the thoughtfulness, the communication, all of it flows naturally from a man who is genuinely invested in who he is becoming. Here is what self-improvement actually means in this context, because it is important to be clear about this. It does not mean being obsessed with the gym to the exclusion of everything else. It does not mean reading every self-help book ever written or following every productivity guru on the internet. It means taking an honest look at the areas of life that need work and actually doing something about them. It means showing up for personal commitments even when motivation is low. It means developing emotional intelligence, financial responsibility, physical health, and mental clarity. Not to impress anyone, but because becoming a better man is a worthy pursuit in and of itself. And the byproduct of that pursuit, the confidence, the direction, the stability it creates, is exactly what women find deeply and genuinely attractive. Now here is the constructive criticism that needs to be said directly and honestly. A lot of men are coasting. They got to a certain level of comfort and stopped pushing. They are the same person they were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago. Same habits, same mindset, same limitations. And they wonder why their relationships feel stagnant, why they keep attracting the same situations, why they never seem to get to the next level. The answer is not out there in the right woman or the right opportunity. The answer is in the mirror. Growth is a choice, and it is a choice that needs to be made every single day. Not perfectly, not dramatically, but consistently and honestly. The men who make that choice are the men who show up differently in every area of life, including relationships. So here is the challenge, and it is a friendly one, coming from a place of genuine respect. Take stock right now of where growth has stalled. Identify one area, just one, where honest effort has been avoided, and where a real commitment to improvement can be made starting today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. Because the version of a man that is being built through consistent daily growth is the version that naturally has everything we talked about in this video. The listening, the confidence, the presence, the thoughtfulness. It all comes together when a man decides, truly decides, that becoming the best version of himself is worth the work. And trust this, it absolutely is. Here is the thought that is worth sitting with long after this video ends. The things that women love most in a man are not the things that most men are out here competing for. While the majority are focused on status, appearance, and material things, the 1% are quietly building the qualities that actually create real, lasting attraction. And that gap between what men think women want and what women actually deeply respond to is where most relationships fail before they even properly begin. Everything covered in this video comes back to one central idea. Become a man of genuine substance. Listen with real intention. Lead with quiet confidence. Create emotional safety. Build a full and purposeful life. Be thoughtful in the small moments. Communicate honestly and without drama, and never stop growing. None of these things require perfection. They require consistency, self-awareness, and the willingness to show up as the best version of yourself. Not for anyone else, but because that standard is worth living by. The men who do these things are not unicorns. They are simply men who decided to pay attention, to do the work, and to show up differently than the crowd. And the results they experience in their relationships reflect that decision every single time. Now here is what I want from you. Which one of these 7 things hit closest to home? Which one do you know deep down needs the most work? Drop it in the comments below. Be honest, be real, because this is a judgment-free space and I read and respond to every single comment. Let's have a real conversation, because that conversation might be exactly what someone else watching this video needs to hear today.